Good morning, everyone. The title of my presentation this morning is A Voting Guide for Peacemakers Under Capitalism, and my name is Sarah Balzer. Today, a full 554 days before the next presidential election, things are already starting to heat up in the political arena. 20 different Democrats are vying for the nomination and the opportunity to challenge President Trump. In the next 554 days, we can expect to see hundreds of political ads, shocking headlines, and hundreds of millions of dollars spent trying to sway our vote. Historically, Mennonites have voted for both parties, and it's easy to get caught up in the drama of political rhetoric. But candidates at all points on the political spectrum have proven to support war and violence. So don't worry, friends, I'm not here to tell you who you should or shouldn't vote for in this next election. Instead, I'd like to turn our attention to all the ways we can vote for peace every day and how we choose to spend our money. I'm talking about voting with our dollars. In the next few minutes, we'll take a look at some major companies that we've all supported, and we'll analyze the ways in which they participate in injustice and therefore fail to promote peace. On November 26, 2018, the New York Times podcast The Daily ran an episode entitled The Human Toll of Instant Delivery. It included an interview with Tasha Morell, a worker in an XPO logistics warehouse. XPO is a $12 billion corporation that works with retailers such as Nike, Verizon, and Disney to help them get their products out to customers as soon as possible. XPO is known for hiring low-income individuals with no college background, who often cannot get jobs in their towns except for in these warehouses, where they must work 14-hour days doing heavy lifting. Tasha told the story of her coworker, Miss Linda, a woman who was not allowed to go home after she reported feeling ill on the job. Soon after speaking to supervisors, Miss Linda collapsed on the floor. The supervisors instructed that no one help or even touch her. No one was able to call for help, and a few minutes later she died, right there on the warehouse floor. The supervisors told everyone that people die, but the customers still need their products, and the other workers had to continue working throughout the day while Miss Linda lay on the floor deceased. When we buy products from companies such as Nike, Verizon, and Disney that work with XPO, we are voting for a world in which this incredibly inhumane treatment is acceptable and normalized. In early 2016, Oxfam America released a report describing the working conditions in Tyson Foods meatpacking plants. Workers reported receiving punishment for taking lunch or even bathroom breaks, and many had stopped eating or drinking to avoid doing so. Later that year, a United States Occupational Safety and Health Administration inspection after an amputation incident found that a Tyson meatpacking plant had 15 serious health and safety violations, including failing to provide safety guards around dangerous equipment, letting CO2 levels surpass the permissible limit, and improperly storing hazardous chemicals that have been linked to respiratory diseases and chemical burns. Many people who work in these plants are recent immigrants or refugees who have few job opportunities in the U.S., and they may feel powerless to speak out against these violations. When we choose to buy our meat from companies like Tyson instead of from a local farmer, our vote shows that we care more about cheap food than we care about keeping workers safe. Fast fashion companies such as Zara, H&M, Adidas, and Gap have been providing Western consumers with affordable fashion for years. The prices keep getting lower and the trends keep coming faster. We get to reap the benefits of cheap, nearly disposable clothing, but someone must pay the real price. These companies outsource their labor to factories in underdeveloped countries, with few environmental regulations and much looser labor laws. According to the nonprofit organization War on Want, in these factories, called sweatshops, the legal limit for temperature is 90 degrees. The work week can be 11 hours per day, 6 days per week, and companies can require their workers to work up to 36 hours of overtime per month. These factories are unsafe, with multiple building collapses and fires, killing thousands of workers in Bangladesh alone within the past 10 years. When we buy clothing from these companies instead of from sustainable fashion companies or our local thrift store, we are voting for the exploitation of workers, keeping them stuck working in these unsafe conditions. Now, I'm sure everyone is feeling a little bit upset and uncomfortable hearing about these stories, but to understand our obligation to intervene from a Christian peace perspective, we must understand what biblical peace means. At its founding, the Mennonite Church saw itself as the kingdom of God within the perfection of Christ, which was separate from the state, beyond the perfection of Christ. Under this view of peace, we were passive, simply refusing to take up the sword. However, as explained in Dreger and Crable's Mennonite Peacemaking from Quietism to Activism, in the 20th century, Mennonites experienced a rise in urbanization, educational achievement, geographical mobility, and global awareness that prompted us to switch to a more active form of peacemaking, where we needed to interact with the state, using our vote to promote peace and social justice. We see that it is our obligation to promote this holistic form of peace to create a better world. This leads to statements from the Mennonite Church, such as the 1961 Christian Witness to the State, which calls us to follow the example of the Apostle Paul's witness and proclamation of faith in front of Roman officials from the book of Acts, chapter 26. It urges Mennonites to challenge statesmen to seek concepts such as justice, equality, freedom, and peace. And we've done this through voting in elections, writing letters to elected officials, protesting wars, and refusing to pay the portion of our tax that goes towards war. But as we continue to witness to the state, we must also recognize that the time has come that we witness to these major companies as well. Under our capitalist society, companies have profited from the unethical treatment of workers, poor environmental practices, and neglecting safety regulations. They rake in billions of dollars a year, and all that money gives them a whole lot of power. They are incredibly influential, not only through their advertising, but also through their power to create and propose legislation that is beneficial to them through groups such as the American Legislative Executive Council. These major corporations have joined the state as one of the most influential powers that be, and they need to be critiqued at the same level as we critique the state. As we've seen today, while capitalism is great for promoting innovation and technology, it isn't so great for creating companies that promote human rights. But under capitalism, we, as the consumers, have the buying power to influence their choices. The Christian Witness to the State statement notes that we can witness through word of mouth, written conversation, or by means of the printed page. And those types of protests have not gone unnoticed to these companies. Due to public outcries, we have seen some progress. In 2017, Tyson announced that they would begin providing regular bathroom breaks and better safety training for their workers. Many fashion companies signed the Accord on Fire Safety in Bangladesh, which is a legally binding agreement between trade unions and fashion companies that holds them accountable for worker safety. But there is still a long ways to go. The injustices in these situations can seem unbearable, and the powers that be can seem too great to overcome. But we cannot use that as an excuse to sit back and continue our support of these companies, who are blatantly participating in violence and injustice. In his book, Building Peace, Sustainable Reconciliation in Divided Societies, distinguished peace scholar and Notre Dame professor John Paul Lederach explains that to create resources for peace building on a global level, we must generate a widespread sense of shared responsibility for the larger systemic dimension of contemporary conflict. While in this book, Lederach is referring to our profiting from the sale of weapons relating to the violence of armed conflict, the same concept can be applied to this problem of companies profiting from treating their workers unethically. We must create a sense of shared responsibility for these injustices. We can all do our small part, buying our food locally, shopping at thrift stores, researching the companies that we buy from, avoiding buying anything we don't absolutely need, and speaking out against companies with unfair labor standards and unethical practices. When we take these small steps, we are using our vote to promote peace. Thank you.